Welcome back. The International Chamber of Commerce Africa Regional Conference. That's what we're looking at now. Now, this is happening in Nigeria. But while we're looking at commerce, there's bound to be, or there are bound to be areas of conflict when you talk business, when you talk living generally. So the issues of arbitration, other sources of conflict resolution, how do we go about all of this? These are some of the things you're likely to be looking at during the conference. I don't have all that information, but I have the information. But why don't I bring on the people that will tell us about this conference to tell us more about it? It's a 3-day conference. It's about arbitration and Africa, prospects and challenges. Especially now that the African continent, and Nigeria in particular, is looking at how to move the economy forward, diversify the economy, bring in more investors. There are bound to be those areas of friction. And so how do we get arbitration and move these things forward? So in the studio to help us get more information about this conference is a chartered arbitrator, the Senior Advocate of Nigeria, Dorothy Ufot, who's the chairman of the Conference Planning Committee. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Bumi Oshuntui is the Secretary General, ICC Nigeria. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning.
Also joining us in this conversation is Tunde Fagbondu, who's the Senior Advocate of Nigeria and Vice Chair of the Planning Committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And Jean Anishere is the Chairman, Logistics Subcommittee. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Good morning.
Ladies and gentlemen. Sounds like I want to introduce boxing.
We're waiting for the great introduction, yes.
Great introduction. Let me begin with you, the Chairman of the Planning Committee. Is the first ICC, can you tell us what this is all about? This is like the first, right?
Yes, it is.
So tell us what it's about, a regional arbitration conference.
I can't talk about that without talking about the ICC. The ICC is the World Business Organization. And one of the major organs of the ICC is the ICC International Court of Arbitration in Paris. The ICC was founded in 1919, while the ICC Court was founded in 1923. What gave rise to the founding of the ICC was when the world businessmen looked at the ravaging effect of the Second World War, which was then ongoing. They came to a conclusion that there has to be world peace through business, through the way we do business. So they came together to form first the ICC in 1919 and then established the ICC International Court of Arbitration. ICC International Court of Arbitration is a dispute resolution institution. As you've rightly said, when we look at investments and commerce and business, it's not possible that you cannot anticipate conflicts and disputes. So how do you resolve these disputes? If you take a typical foreign investor, the foreign investor would not like to submit itself to the courts of the host country. So the importance of the relationship of arbitration and investment and business is because one of the crucial elements for attracting foreign investment is the confidence that there will be a viable mechanism for resolving any dispute that arises. And arbitration, there are many options, like mediation, arbitration, medhab. But the advantage that arbitration has is because the award is the judgment that comes, is the closest thing to a court judgment because it is enforceable. It's even stronger than a court judgment because by virtue of the New York Convention of 1958, most countries in the world are members of the New York Convention. And what the New York Convention obligates you to do is to enforce any arbitral award that has been reached through due process. So for instance, if I have a dispute with you and I'm trying to enforce in the Lagos High Court as an example, and you are, coming up with all sorts of things, if I realize, and there are people who are paid to trace assets, if I realize that you have assets in New York, for instance, the New York court will enforce the award. So there's no hiding place in arbitration, and that is the attraction for arbitration.
I don't look forward to having conflicts with you.
So, but this gives businessmen and women confidence, because when you go into business, you're going to business to make returns. And once a dispute arises, and the beauty about arbitration is also that the investment or the project does not need to stop. Take a construction dispute, for instance, a huge construction dispute. Time is of the essence. Money has been borrowed from the bank. If you look at going to the normal courts, you would take 10 years to resolve the dispute. But in arbitration, the dispute will be, the construction will continue, for instance, but you would still go ahead and resolve the dispute. So what you do in that circumstance is that the parties will come together, go to the project site, take inventory to say, hey, this contractor, this is where you stop. So we know what you have expended. The new contractor that is coming in, this is where you're starting. So nothing holds you back. And that is what, foreign investors like. Because they're entering into a challenging environment. They don't know the region, but something must give them confidence. So that's the beauty of arbitration.
Mrs. Asuntuyi, she's spoken about foreign investment and business and all that. How does one determine in what country one is going to take one's arbitration to? Okay, like I'm dealing with a German company now, and they have defaulted. Where do I take my case to for arbitration?
Okay, thank you. The process will start from the signing of the contract and the content of that contract. I think that for the ICC, if you want to take the process through the ICC court, you have to, from onset, insert that clause in the contract, that in the instance of any dispute, this process will go through the ICC arbitration for settlement. So
which
the
is
case,
in Paris, right?
Which is in Paris, but the seat of arbitration does not necessarily have to be in Paris.
Okay.
That will also be determined by the parties. The parties will determine where they want to have as the seat of the arbitration. If it's a case between two Nigerian companies, looking at it, the parties may have taken into consideration that this will be cheaper if we have the arbitration done here in Nigeria, then they can have the seat of arbitration here.
Okay.
The only thing is that they have to go through the ICC. ICC has a rule, the ICC arbitration rule. So these are the processes to guide the dispute resolution practices if they have to do it here.
Okay. Now let's go back to the conference.
Yes.
Mr. Fagbonlu, you are the Vice Chair Planning Committee. First of all, what's the theme of this year's conference?
Well, it's about Africa. It's about arbitration on Africa, the prospects and challenges. With every arbitration conference, two themes are always significant. You look at arbitration itself as a mechanism. It's come out from the discussions before now that arbitration is a means of resolving commercial disputes. It kind of complements the court system, because of course you would ask the question, the courts are there to resolve commercial disputes. Why do you need arbitration? Well, arbitration, like Dorothy said just now, was established to specifically focus on the needs of the business community. But with every mechanism that you establish, you have to constantly evaluate it. Otherwise, it will fall behind the expectations of its users. So that's always a major theme in every arbitration conference around the world, whether it's in Africa, whether it's in Europe or in America. There's always an effort to evaluate the mechanism and ensure that it's keeping in touch with the expectations of the users, and cutting-edge issues about it are always constantly examined. Say, for instance, questions about costs will be discussed. in this conference. But then, like I said, the theme is about Africa, arbitration and Africa, prospects and challenges. So quite aside from those problems that are inherent in the system itself, whether it's the judicial system or the arbitral system, quite aside from discussing the problems that are inherent in the arbitral system and how these are to be addressed, there are also questions about arbitrating in Africa. What are the peculiarities of the problems that you have to deal with because you've chosen an African country or an African city as your seat of arbitration? So the arbitration is located in an African country. Are there any peculiar problems that arise that have to be addressed to ensure that arbitration keeps in line with the expectations of the user?
Yeah, earlier you said there are the courts and then there's arbitration.
Yes.
Where does arbitration take place?
Yes. I think the analogy I always like to use when comparing arbitration with the courts is the difference between taking a bus to your office and on the other hand, driving your own car to your office. The courts are a public facility. They dispense justice to everyone at a price that is very subsidized, because the government pays the salary of the judges, the government establishes the infrastructure and all whatnot. Arbitration is the private analogy
arrangement
of the judicial system.
So it can take place in any